so much for taking a few moments out of one of our last summer Fridays to come onto a call to talk about campus jobs. Um, I want to say that it's getting a little bit easier every time we launch into a new fall after having implemented Workday a couple of years ago. So thank you all for your continued efforts to learn the system. I'm Jennifer. We'll do some more introductions later, but I'm Jennifer from Beyond Barnard. And what we're going to do today is go over what's new for the fall and then give a refresher of sort of a soup to nuts overall picture of how to use Workday for campus roles in your departments. And then at the very end, if you would like to stay on, which the refresher is also optional, by the way, then we have an optional demo at the end just to walk through job requisitions. So for some of you, this will be sort of old hat. You won't need to hear all of this again, and you might just want to focus on the beginning. It's really up to you. The first thing we want to highlight is the support resources that we have available. Just a reminder that you can go to help articles. We have a pretty robust library there. Of course, create a case if there's something technical or some sort of roadblock that you just can't figure out that can't be answered via email. You can open a case for that. Call us or email us. We have a lot of eyes on the inbox, so we try to help there as much as possible because nobody uses the phone anymore. So reach out if you need us. In terms of upcoming dates for support and resources, we have an information session today for on-campus managers. If you happen to know anyone who's an off-campus federal work-study manager, we're also doing one next Friday for them. And then we have some office hours on Zoom, and of course, the ever-popular 15 minutes with Rashawn, which are one-on-one 15-minute troubleshooting appointments. In terms of the agenda for today, we want to make sure, give you a reminder of who we are at Beyond Barnard, remind you of the general life cycle of what happens for campus roles every year, and sort of the life cycle of the individual student experience, and your experience as managers. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about what's new for fall 2024 in part one, then transition to a Workday refresher, which is part two of the agenda, where we'll give you that sort of soup to nuts overview, as well as time for questions and the Workday demo at the end. Again, I mentioned I am Jennifer Porter. I am the Director of Communications and Operations for BM Barnard. A lot of my time is spent working on administering campus roles. And then Rashawn, you want to say a quick hello?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rashawn Giles. I am the admin assistant for the communications and operations team at Beyond Barnard, specifically overseeing student employment things. So happy to see you all and happy to help however I can.
So the first thing we want to recap is sort of the life cycle of what happens with a campus role. And this is slightly different this year, only because we've been able to make this fabulous improvement to processing so that we don't have to terminate and rehire students who may be continuing, let's say, from spring of one academic year into summer or into fall. And so the new wrinkle here is that you might be continuing in a campus role instead of sort of rolling off and, excuse me, and being rehired. So in terms of what happens in the business process life of Workday and sort of the terminology we use, there's a recruitment portion of the life cycle where you have an open position, you need to fill it, you create a job requisition, you post your job requisition. Then there's the hiring portion. So that kicks off a new BP or business process in the system, so that you can go through the proper approvals and you can get costing allocations sorted out. Then after the hire is actually approved and completed, the student is required to go through onboarding, which includes the I-9 process, which has an in-person component to show documentation at Beyond Barnard in person that has to happen within 3 days. That's a kind of a pain point compliance-wise for many students, so something definitely to keep in mind. And then once they're up and in the role, they're entering their hours in the system, they're being paid, everything is being processed and delivered either through direct deposit, which is definitely ideal, or through a check if necessary. And then, of course, we terminate the role, or if it's an additional role and they have multiple campus jobs, then we call it ending the additional job. So hopefully that is all pretty familiar to most of you. One thing that we want to emphasize as we move to the fall is it's always important to post positions as soon as you possibly can. New student orientation is sort of reformatted a little bit for this year. There are 3 required days for students and sort of 2 optional days on the weekend. So we will be talking to students at the end of August. And oh dear, Sylvia, okay, be safe. We'll be talking to people at the end of August that are new to Barnard, and I promise you that we're going to have hands shoot up and say, where do I find a campus role? How do I apply? Or I already went on Workday. I'm not seeing very much. And so anything you can do to get those job requisitions up and posted by Monday, August 26th is really appreciated. So let's talk a little bit about what is new for fall 2024. We have student-specific supervisory organizations, which is, I think, a big and hopefully very welcome change. So before, especially for those of you that manage a combination of staff and students, and you may have lots of staff, or you may have, a dozen or 2 dozen students who roll up to you, you open up the org chart in Workday, and it's sort of a gobbledygook of all of these folks and all of these open positions. Now the supervisory organizations, SUP orgs, are separated. And so that helps us keep the business processes cleaner. It prevents some of the problems of people accidentally going down the wrong path. And it can help with delegation, so that if you're trying to set up, you're going out or something like that, and you need someone to cover something, it separates those streams, so to speak. So hopefully that will be something that, again, provides some clarity to all of you if you do supervise multiple different constituents of employees. We also had to implement this summer, which we found out as we were processing payroll, we had to implement these summer job profiles in order to properly accommodate FICA taxation. So we will definitely make sure that those are switched over for the fall, so that if a student is continuing from summer to fall, one of the things that needs to happen is for that job profile to be switched over to an on-campus federal work study profile, or if they don't have work study at Barnard Job. So we will take care of that centrally as much as we possibly can, but that's something to keep in mind, is that you don't want to be reaching for that summer job profile for the fall or the spring. Next up is our second required minimum wage increase. So it is from $16 now to $17 an hour. So if you are hiring a first-year student, or have a student that previously made 16, they now need to make 17. Again, this is something that we can centrally update just to make sure that everyone has remembered to do this. But you can also, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you can also implement a compensation change and initiate that on your own as a manager. It's a pretty easy process. And then again, remember that if a student is continuing in a campus role, they should get a 50% raise. So everybody should be making 17. And then if it's their second year, for instance, they would be bumped up an additional 50 cents, just to make sure that we're rewarding that consistency if you're bringing a student back in. For the updates, as I said, we have this new process where you can initiate a change. We sent out an email in the spring. I was so excited about this. I think I call them quick change templates or something like that, because instead of going through this laborious business process scavenger hunt, you can go right to this button that says update students campus role, and it's a shortcut. So you can initiate a compensation change, you can change the job title, and importantly, change the end employment date. I really want to highlight the fact that just as we had to change end employment dates in the spring, this must be done for all of your employees that are continuing and active in the system from summer to fall. The end employment date needs to be changed, because if that doesn't happen, when all of the federal work study awards feed over from financial aid system, because there's a connection between Workday and financial aid system, those work study awards are rolling in. And if we don't tell the system in Workday that something has changed by initiating some sort of change, then it won't check eligibility. And then that student won't have their wages credited against their work study award, which means that we as an institution are not spending down those federal funds, which is a huge problem. So if you could please start that process and finish it by August 30th, and update that end employment date, which we'll highlight that in a minute, for what the exact dates will be, if it's a fall employee or a student that will be for fall and spring. That's really critically important. Next thing that's new is the stipend request process. So again, just a caveat that we always discourage the use of stipends. It can be hard to estimate what a student actually should be earning. They don't have access to paid professional development, which is all done by the hour. They have to do required harassment and, discrimination training. That's by the hour. So there's a lot of reasons not to use stipends, but if you absolutely have to, um, they can't be issued until the student is hired. Just a reminder that they have to be up and running in Workday in order for us to process a stipend. And that should always be done before they're working. They shouldn't be putting in a bunch of time and energy and not be hired and ready to go in the system. We ask for 14 days before the pay date to have adequate time to process that. Remember that if you're paying a stipend, the goal is to estimate how many hours that the project may require and then multiply that by 17 to get the total amount, because we don't want anyone on working with the stipend payment to be making less than what the comparable hourly wage would be. They have to do their onboarding and social security number stuff just as they would for any other position. And in terms of the new process for how you can initiate either a one-time payment or period activity pay, there's full instructions in this new article that's posted, so that again, you can do that through Workday. You don't have to submit the Google form and kind of do this extra step outside of Workday. Everything now is housed internally within Workday. And then last and not least, but not least for the fall, many of you may have known this already, students are entitled by law to safe and sick time. And previously there was a different process where they entered it on their timesheet, but we actually now have instituted a process so that it's the same as a staff person entering time. So they go to the absence app, they can open up the calendar, they can click on the calendar, enter their time, and it doesn't actually need go through the supervisor for approval. And this safe and sick time, is earned at a calculated rate based on the absence app is in Workday. Yes. So when you go to your hamburger, I think it's called, the 3 lines, and you look at the menu or you look at your catalog of apps, there's one called absent. So students would open that up, they would submit their absence, and it's calculated, by law, so that they're earning based on the hours that they've worked, they're earning an appropriate amount of hours for safe and sick time. They log it against the position that they're utilizing the safe and sick time for, and that all happens pretty seamlessly. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, because students, again, by law, do have the opportunity to use that. Like I said, we have a lot to go through today, so we're going to just take a quick pause and see if anyone has any super burning questions. You can either put them in the chat or you can come off mute.
Hi, I have a question. So, say in terms of the stipend, say a professor has a student researcher and they have the student in their lab, but they are not able to pay the student. And then they get some sort of grant that makes them able to pay the student for their efforts. It wasn't originally the agreement, but they would like to then pay the student a stipend kind of retroactively. Is that not able to happen?
I would say that that is probably a good example of how a stipend might be a good solution. So if they were working, unpaid, they weren't hired in the system, but then this money became available and you would like to hire them and pay them at that point, I think that that's a viable solution for that. But if you know upfront, we have $5,000 to pay a student over the course of the year, we have a sense of what the plan will be, and you still choose to go the stipend route, that's what we're discouraging.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Jennifer, it will be very difficult for the faculty in our department to meet the August 30th deadline because they do not know yet the student who will be able to work as a research assistant for the fall in the labs. So we will not very likely able to meet that deadline.
Okay. What I would do is just do your best. We just want to make sure that that eligibility check happens before the student begins working for the fall. So if you make a note that the student is planning, to come and start mid-September, the important thing is to make sure that that change happens before they begin working.
Okay, thank you.
So safe time, that's just a word that the government utilizes to accommodate different, various reasons that someone might need PTO or protected time that's guaranteed by law. That's essentially all that means. And I'm sorry if my sound is going out. I'm not sure why that is. Okay, I think what we'll do now is transition to Rashawn. So those are the highlights of what's new for this year. What we'll do now is sort of walk through some of the nuts and bolts of what you need to know as a manager. So if, again, this is all familiar, you can feel free to log off or you can sit in. And then at the very end of this session, we will do a 5 to 10 minute demo as a refresher to walk through job requisitions.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. Happy to walk through a few of these refresher points with you. So we'll be talking about compensation policies and classes, some recruitment things, job requisitions, as those are pretty popular, the ever popular hiring a student, and what you need to remember for processing any new hires. We'll talk about some reports that are available, other general resources, and then open it up for another Q&A at the end. So as Jennifer mentioned, the minimum wage for this year is $17 per hour. It'll go up to $18 per hour next fall. This is our standard policy on raises, so minimum 50-cent raise for each year of experience. And then you can sort of estimate what a student would inevitably earn by the end of their senior year based on this as well. We have 5 standardized tiers for compensation that correlate to different levels of skills, and those can be found on the next slide. So starting at $17 an hour, we have entry-level types of positions all the way up to $24 or more per hour for things that require multiple years of experience, highly specialized skills, things for your more senior student workers. So this is the timeline for job requisitions. You'll initiate the job requisition on your end. It'll be approved by Beyond Barnard, and you can then post the job. Candidates will apply, and you'll review. Moving forward, any necessary candidates to your interview stages. Sorry. you'll be able to extend offers verbally, and then move them to ready for hire in the Workday platform after a verbal offer is extended and accepted. And then students will go through the paperwork route, accepting the offer in Workday, going through onboarding paperwork, as Jennifer mentioned before, especially the I-9 completed within 3 days of the hire. We want that completed as soon as possible so that it is federally compliant. So all campus roles need to be posted through a job requisition and a subsequent job posting. So if you have those open positions, make sure to get them up as soon as possible. We want equal opportunity for all campus roles to all students. This doesn't mean that you have to hire, all students. That's obviously not possible, but we want the option to be there for the students as they arrive to campus. In the career app, you can select Find Jobs Student in order to get to the actual student postings to check and make sure that your posting is up. And then once a job requisition is filled, Workday will automatically unpost the job and disposition the remaining candidates so that they get a message saying that the position has been filled. And if you end up going through the manual hire process outside of the job requisition in order to hire your students, you have to remember to go in manually to unpost the job. So in order to hire or recruit, you need to know what's available to you already. We want you to reuse open positions as much as possible. So the way that you can do that is going to your supervisory organization. You can type supervisory organization and then your name to review what student members you have. And then there's a staffing section as well that shows you what unfilled positions you already have. So we'll get into this with a demo in just a second, but the task create job requisition is what you are going to be most familiar with when gathering your positions for recruitment and then inevitably hiring. So the options that you have, you can create new positions with a job requisition. You can create a job requisition for existing positions or an existing position that you already have, or multiple existing positions if you have multiple positions for one job title that you'd like to use. And then job profiles are incredibly important. They have been sort of streamlined and simplified. So they make a little bit more sense than what we used to have. Now, you, in the job profile field, you navigate to the options that you have by following these steps: by job family, student employee, then Barnard campus roles. The default selection we recommend is FWS on-campus role for federal work-study eligibility. This helps us with automation of job profile selection on the hire process. And so go ahead and select that. And then to be familiar with the other job profiles that you have, the non-federal work-study Barnard job hourly is what we change students to when they don't have federal work-study awards. So if you get an inbox action from me after you submit a hire or a change job saying, hi, please change the job profile. That's just because through the eligibility check that Workday automatically kicks off, we recognize that the student doesn't have federal work study and that they need to be switched to non-federal work study. And then the third and fourth option on here are what you would use for stipends. So OTP stands for one-time payment. PAP stands for period activity pay. Keep those in mind as well. Now, we've talked about a lot about dates. So the official dates for this year, as far as end dates go, is December 25th for fall hires and fall continuations into this school year. And then May 14th, 2025, just graduation day for academic year or spring term roles. And I sort of mentioned this before, but initially when the manager is going to create the job requisition, once you hit submit, it kicks off to Beyond Barnard. I'll review and approve. Be sure to be attentive to your inbox because I may send things back to you, request more information. Or if I approve it, you'll get a post-job task in your inbox that you can take action on as instructed. We have a better leveraged offer stage. You want to verbally confirm things like the wage and first day of work to make sure you and the student are on the same page. Confirm the student has a social security number and make sure that they know or that they've updated it in Workday. This is especially important for our international students, but also some domestic students may need to enter their social security number. This is updated with the registrar, so feel free to reach out if they have trouble accessing the registrar's form. You can explain the onboarding process to your hires. So this needs to happen early and often being for each student who hasn't worked on campus before. They should not work prior to their hire date. And so unless there's some extenuating circumstance, sort of like what Sylvia mentioned earlier, your students shouldn't be working until they've been properly onboarded. That's in order to be federally compliant. And then remember that a thorough offer plus complete onboarding equals a clean hire. Get those hires clean. Make sure that everyone's on the same page. So, the verbal offer checklist, you'll basically move the student from interview to offer in the job requisition. And I can talk a little bit more later about what that looks like. It'll generate an offer letter for the student to review and acknowledge. Beyond Barnard can't process the hire until that offer is accepted. Make sure that they know that after the verbal and workday offer are submitted. And then we have a few notifications that go out to students depending on the circumstance. So there's a thank you for applying, just general acceptance of your application. There's an application denial notification that says, thank you for applying. You know, basically we filled this position or someone else was more qualified. You can also customize these notifications in the Workday platform if you want different language. And then, of course, the offer letter will be in the system as a notification with terms of employment. Okay, so rehiring. Well, this is more so for hiring right off the bat now that we have the change job processing for continuing students. But if you're trying to submit a hire for a new student and you're going outside of the job requisition, you want to do the direct hire process, you'll use the report hire student. You just type that into the search bar. The position will typically be found under positions without job requisitions if you haven't created a job requisition for, if you're just reusing old positions. If you've created a job requisition newly get your positions open, it'll be found under positions with job requisitions. Remember the job profile section from earlier in the presentation to make sure you get that FWS on-campus role job profile filled in so that we can check eligibility for federal work study. You'll want to standardize your job title so that it's specific to the position and the department. So student assistant beyond Barnard, teaching assistant psychology, things like that. And then, of course, the end employment date, as mentioned before. Sorry, this is a typo. It should be 12/25/2024 for fall hires and May 14th, 2025 for academic year hires. And then on hiring, we need some information from you all for the budget piece. So in the comment section, you're going to include your account number that the student's going to be paid from, whether that's just your general cost center for your department or a specific program, grant, or gift. And then after you hit submit, you'll get a split costing questionnaire that looks like this. When in doubt, check yes to this. But this is specifically for, this is especially for people with specific programs or gifts attached to like specified funding for your student workers. But if you don't know if this applies to you, it's always safe to check yes. And then finance can read your comments to see where it's paid from and then apply the costing accordingly. So there are some reports that will be helpful to you all's processes. So there's the Federal Work Study Balance Report, which returns the remaining balance for federal work study based on pay results that have been processed. And then we also have an all student workers report that returns a list of students in your supervisory organization. So another way to see who is under your purview. And then the onboarding status summary lets you know who's completed onboarding or not. And it'll show a percentage with what tasks they need to complete, what tasks they have completed, and sort of helps you navigate that 3-day onboarding requirement with your student after initiation of their hire. And now we'll talk about some of our article resources. Basically, the biggest one is this update students campus role or change job process that we've implemented. There's an article on that that's really helpful. We have the compensation policies that were shown before in an article if you ever want to refer to those to determine pay amounts. The payroll schedule has been updated for the academic year this year, so make sure to take a look at that, especially if you're looking at stipends for students. You can determine what dates to use based on that payroll schedule. Changing a pay rate for an hourly student is now a process owned by the manager, so you can just submit a wage change if you don't need to update other pieces of a student's campus role. And this article shows you how to do that. And then, of course, there is requesting a stipend, a one-time payment or period activity pay for students. That article takes you through exactly how to do that as well. So here's our onboarding checklist. Some key things to highlight are the social security number, which needs to be updated with the registrar, a permanent home address, which needs to be updated with the registrar. In Workday, a student will receive WTPA, letting them know how much they're getting paid. They'll be able to complete their W-4, their state withholding elections, and then, of course, the I-9, which is 2 parts. The first being a form in Workday, and then the second being the in-person verification that Jennifer mentioned with Beyond Barnard. And then, of course, we want all students, if able, to sign up for direct deposit, as it ensures timely delivery of their payments. This is the payroll schedule. This is sort of what it looks like. Students get paid every other Friday, with deadlines on Wednesdays and Thursdays from the previous week, aligning with the pay period dates. So as a reminder, these are the ways to get in contact with us. Those help articles have been beefed up to really target the processes that you all navigate. Create a case if you have an issue that needs to be escalated to one of our team members. Feel free to give us a call or email us as well, as we have multiple people keeping eyes on those. And now I think I will do, not I think, I will do a little demo of a job requisition. So let me pull that up really quickly.
And we can also open it up to questions that you may have had as we went over that material as well before we do the demo. So when, how soon can continuing office or assistants or student workers return? So technically it's the first day of classes, but if they're on campus earlier and want to begin working earlier, that's also completely fine. Again, we just need to make sure that that end employment date is updated if they're currently in an active role so that it triggers their work study eligibility. And if you're hiring, then you could hire them as you normally would.
Cool. I have a question. So it's clearly optimal to put out a job requisition for equity's sake. Is it still possible to complete direct hires? And would there be scenarios in which that would be okay?
Yeah, and I realize that's where the confusion in that one slide comes in, because we're trying to communicate, just as you're saying, that the sort of the way that it was done for many, many years, which I think actually has reduced, but of sort of identifying students and kind of hiring them almost under the table without opening it up for interviewing to the entire student population. We really are trying to pull away from that. But of course, there are going to be circumstances where that's just not practical. It's not logical given the role and the goals of the position. But you know, the golden rule is whenever you possibly can, you want to open it up. And it's also not just for the students to have the opportunity to apply, but just even for students to understand that the rules even exist, right? So you may say, okay, almost like an internal hire, right? So like if we have a staff hire and we say there's an internal candidate, you know, who's been identified, but you still give people the opportunity to apply. You can also almost think of it that way, where you've identified a candidate who you're pretty sure is going to get the job, but you're still going to post it. All students will be able to see it, understand what the world of possibilities might be, and then potentially even apply. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
I have one separate question, and that is, if I want to change a student job for another supervisory organization, how can I go about doing that? I can see the button to update it for my own student, and I can access a change job template for someone else with a little more difficulty, but not be able to fill out every field. Like, for instance, in one section, I couldn't fill out the end job date. I could under the compensation portion, but not under a different one.
So you're saying this would be a situation where the campus role reports to someone who's not you?
Yes, so more specifically, I help another staff member in my department with hiring while they're busy with a bunch of other things. But during the semester, they like to be able to manage their own students, and it's far more practical for them to approve their time and deal with those issues. This has been possible because of, you know, that I'm able to be a search committee lead, that sort of thing.
Okay.
The problem is that if I'm not the soup org, I don't have access to help them with some of those job changes.
I made a note of that to talk to Workday support because my guess is that it might be something to do because you're a DA, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you have this special hybrid powers that not all managers have, and I have a feeling it might have something to do with that. Rashawn, I don't know if you have any other thoughts, but it's probably a combination of that, and then the potential solution would be either that we are able to fix something along those lines, or maybe set up a delegation where that would be able to be delegated to you from the person who's the direct supervisor.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the task for updating a student's campus role is called change job, and that is something that can be delegated, but I don't know if as it's configured, um, it if it gets as granular as you being able to delegate specifically the change job template for students in campus roles, or if it delegates the task change job like more generally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So which is what you've been seeing when you go to that task change job, like just on
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, we can look this later if it's if necessary. I have been able to access the task for specific students, but there's
mhm.
certain parts of that form which I think I should be able to change, maybe I'm wrong, that I can't. Or I think that I'm supposed to be able to change, or supposed to change that I can't. So
Yeah. So yeah, give us an opportunity to look at it with Workday support. We'll meet with them for sure on Monday, but um, if we can touch base either today or Monday with them, I'm sure we'll be able to get a clearer answer to your question.
thank you.
I have a question about the minimum wage, and if the minimum wage is going up $1 each year, does that mean, like, for example, I'll have a student who's going to continue, let's say they make $20 an hour as a research assistant, and they were here a year, so they get an extra 50 cents. But if I keep them at $20, the difference between 16 an hour and 17 an hour, seems to me they're almost losing $1 an hour because the minimum wage has gone up. So based on my budget, do I raise everybody that's working $1? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, this is a really common, I actually had a whole conversation with Brian about this because it's a very common thought process and sort of a dilemma for managers. And ultimately that decision is up to you. If you were to look at how many students you have, what they're making, what your budget would be, you extrapolate the hourly wage and then say, can I afford to raise them up $1? Because I understand what you're saying. It sort of dilutes the wage that they made last year if everybody comes up, but they don't. So it would be the situation anywhere when the minimum wage goes up, you kind of have to do that analysis and figure out what works for you. But, just I would say if I would encourage you, if you're able to accommodate that you try to, so that it doesn't dilute the amount that they were making before compared to this year.
Okay, and
Yeah, it can be stressful on the budget. Finance did an analysis a couple of years ago when we looked at this tiered, fiscal year raising of the wage and determined that it could be accommodated. But if you have any, concerns, you're like, I really don't think this is going to work, I would definitely go back to finance and discuss it with them if it's a budget issue.
be posted in Workday, the fiscal year.
What was that?
Do you know when the fiscal year 25 budget will be posted in Workday? Mine isn't there yet.
I don't know that. I thought it was posted. But again, that would be a finance question. I think
Okay,
definitely okay, so someone else has theirs, so not sure why you don't have yours.
Okay, so I'll do a case. I'll put a case into finance. I don't. And, I think that's it. The only other thing, excuse me, the only other thing I want to mention is we had interviewed students as research assistants for last semester. We had 2 finalists. We hired one. That person quit for whatever reason. And now we offered the job to our second person. And they have to know a lot of how to research and sociology. So the job was already offered to them, and I just want to hire them in Workday. That would be a specific case where I don't have to post the job. I hate wasting people's time applying when you're not hiring them. That's, if something happens to us a lot.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good example. So like, for instance, we ourselves at Beyond Barnard might have a situation where a student worked for us, then they took a semester off to study abroad or something, and we know they're just going to come back into that same role. We're not going to go through the whole job requisition posting process because it's like a personnel matter, essentially. So that would be an example of where that hire student tool can be really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions before we go into the demo. So I see a hand raised.
Hi, I have a related question with the one that Marcy just asked. And our department realized that there is variability with respect to the amount of hourly pay for a student hired as a teaching assistant. Do you have information about how much the students are paid across the department, so we can be like other department, or at least it's an issue that the department might know about, and there is a kind of homogeneity with respect to the salary?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And we do have hourly wage data, where we could do a look back and try to figure that out. My memory serves from the last time I looked at the data, it's not tremendously variable. It's not like $8 an hour, something like that typically. But I honestly think that that's probably a great conversation to have in-house in academic affairs as well, and maybe say, can we all have a meeting where we hash this out? Because that's a policy question more than anything else about how that is determined internally and how it can be equitable and fairly represent the skills required. And then if you determine what that is, then you would just say, okay, here are the classifications as outlined by Beyond Barnard. How do we want to slot in this particular type of role or a research assistant role? and standardize that as a policy in your own department. I think that would be fabulous.
If you have the data, would you mind to share the data with us?
Let me see if I can get sort of a summary put together. I don't want to hand out raw data, but I can try to put some head counts together. Sure.
Thank you very much. That would be helpful.
Sure. Okay. Any other burning questions before we do the job requisition demo? Okay. All you, Rashawn.
All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen again. I'm logged into Workday as myself, and we'll just sort of go through what a job requisition looks like from start to almost finish. So the task is create job requisition. You can get to this from your recruiting dashboard, or you can just type create job requisition. Abbreviations for the words are also possible, as Workday is smart enough to detect what you're looking for. So it's going to be this first task. You'll click it. You have the option to copy details from an existing job requisition. So if you look under my job requisitions, you can see all of the ones that you've created in the past. You see, I filled a lot of these Beyond Barnard student assistants. So I'll take the most recent one, which will be the highest number, and fill it in, put it into that field. Because I'm looking to hire, let's say I'm looking to hire one extra person to add to my roster, I'll select create new position. But keep in mind that you can also create a job requisition for an existing position if you have an existing position you'd like to fill, or multiple existing positions if you have more than one position open that you'd like to fill. But for now, I'll just select create new position. The worker type needs to be employee. If you choose non-paid worker, they're not going to get paid. So leave that alone and then click OK. All right, this first screen is just some general information about the position that you're looking for. So the number of openings for me is going to be 1. The reason is going to be under the student section of this field. So down at the bottom, create job requisition student. And then we'll do new employee since I'm looking for a new hire. The recruiting instruction is always going to be for students post to student jobs. Unless you have a position where you're creating a position where no posting is necessary, then you can use the no posting necessary option. But I am going to select post to student jobs for right now. The recruiting start date, you can leave as today's date. The target hire date will be September 3rd, the first day of classes. Again, if you have students starting earlier, you can set that to an earlier date. And then the target end date we'll select will be May 14th, 2025, in line with our standardized dates for this academic year. And then we'll click next. So as you can see, the job profile populated from what I had selected previously. The only difference is that this year we want the job profile to be federal work study on campus. Before I get into that, though, you'll see that the job title is standardized so that it's specific to both the position and the department, in parentheses at the end. One thing to note, when you update the job profile, it automatically overrides the job description details that are listed here. So I recommend copying this to your clipboard so that you have it saved or saving it in a document in your own department's shared drive for longevity purposes. If you click as outlined in the presentation before by job family, and then student employee, and then on-campus Barnard roles, you'll see the options that are available to you for the academic year. You can select FWS on-campus role 7030. As I mentioned before, it sort of overrides the job description, so I'm going to copy that back into this section. Keep in mind that these are sort of standard, well, with the exception of primary location, these are sort of the standard selections for these fields. So worker subtype will always be undergraduate student employee for student roles. The time type will always be part-time. The location can be specific to your department, so whatever building your department lives in. Posting location will be New York, New York. And then the next field, scheduled weekly hours, can just be an average or the low end or high end of how many hours you expect the student will work per week. It needs to be under 15, so or 15 or below. That's how many hours a week students can work during the academic year. And then you'll click next. Uh-oh. I didn't see this error message up over here. There is no additional job profile. I'm not sure why it's erroring out. I'll just leave that as is for right now. There won't be an error message when you try to submit. And then costing. So you'll want to make sure that only the fund, cost center, and function fields are filled in. If you have a program grant or gift, you can enter that number to get your cost center, fund, or function to automatically populate. It'll fill in based on those details, but for this stage of the process, these fields need to be left blank, the program, gift, and grant fields. So be sure to leave those as is. And then the last thing on this page is that the supporting office for this position will always be beyond Barnard for student positions. So make sure that's selected so that it doesn't go down the wrong process. No attachments are necessary. If you want to add a document like a flyer or something like that, you can, but this isn't a required step. The compensation, you can edit the hourly compensation underneath the hourly tab. If it's a non-stipended position, this will zero out if you have a stipend job profile selected. So no need to worry about filling in anything there. The stipend amount is filled in on the actual stipend request. But in general, for the hourly positions, you can update it with this edit pencil. We'll want this to be $17 an hour for this academic year as a reminder. You'll update it there. And then the last section is the assign roles section. So you'll click add. The role is going to be HR partner for job requisition. And then you'll assign it to myself, Rashawn Giles. That's how you spell that. And then you also have the option of adding search committee members. So yeah, there are a few different titles available. I'm going to just select search committee member, and we'll add Jennifer for the heck of it. Oh, there are a lot of Jennifers, sorry. There we go. And then if you click next, you'll be able to review everything that you just filled out. Make sure everything looks good. And then once you hit submit, it'll route to Beyond Barnard for approval. Be sure to look at your inbox to check for when that post-job task comes to you afterwards. And you also have the option of saving for later if you want to get started on it and don't have the time to complete everything or don't have all the information necessary. And yeah, so that's how you create a job requisition.
Marcia had a question about search leads, which I'm actually not sure what the answer to that is.
Yeah, hold on, let me see what's the question. You can add yourself as search lead if you would like. And that's especially helpful if you're not the manager, the hiring manager, if you're creating a job requisition for someone else. So yeah.
I'll just continue it. So that for hiring students that report to me, I'm considered the hiring manager.
Mhm.
Because when I hire faculty, the chair is considered the hiring manager. So maybe I don't need to add myself as the search lead if I'm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're the hiring manager, you won't need to add yourself as a search lead.
Okay.
You'll automatically have all the permissions that you need.
Thank you.